Hello. Time for a vlog, basically. Haven't done one for a while, I think. It's been sightseeing videos mostly, hasn't it? So I just thought I'd talk about stuff that I've been pondering on and off over the last few weeks, and a bit of an update on the channel and odds and ends. So today it's capitalism, universal basic income, Brexit, gameplay videos, and a few other odds and ends, like how unlikely it is we are to be even existing on this planet. Alright, just anything that's come into my head basically is what it's about. So, just some thoughts about capitalism really, because we live in the West under a capitalist system, and even actually in supposedly non-capitalist countries like China, they really have a capitalist style economic system. So it's everywhere. I just wanted to point out that although it may be the best system that we know, it's not perfect. And as such, despite what the extreme capitalists argue, I think it needs to be managed somewhat. Because we've got to make sure it does what people want, and the right people as well. You see, one of its flaws is one of its strengths, which is that it does what the market wants, and the arch capitalists will argue accordingly. Yes, that's right. If there's demand for X, capitalism will find a way to produce X, no matter what damage it does to the environment. It'll try and meet the demand. But we know that something like 1% of the population owns about half of the world's wealth. And capitalism follows money, right? So what capitalism does is not what you and I want, it's what the 1% with the money want. So that's actually bearing on another of capitalism's issues, which is, although it's really good at generating wealth, and I think everybody agrees on that, it's very, very poor at distributing it fairly. In fact, it requires a certain amount of unfair distribution of wealth in order to generate incentives for people, because you want to do well, right? And hence you're prepared to work hard and start a business and go bankrupt half a dozen times before you can get one that works, and so on. In many countries, though, bankruptcy is total paralysis financially for the rest of your life, so those countries tend not to get very rich. Britain and America have figured out that you need to let people go bankrupt and let them off after a couple of years, and then they can try again. Because the average successful small business is the successor of 5 failed ones. And that's just the way it goes. But its tendency to concentrate wealth has gone so far that, well, maybe it's never changed, because even from prehistory we've had warlords and kings and all the rest who've basically owned everything through violence, and now they own it through sheer wealth and trade. But they still own it. And of course they're not going to want to give it up, are they? And our wonderful political systems, which somehow manage to freely elect wealthy people all the time, aren't changing that. I mean, we had a few decades of left-wingism in Britain under like the old Labour Party and all that, but it didn't really change anything in terms of fairness. It did for a time, and the economy actually worked really well for a time, and then Thatcherism came in, and actually some of the problems of the left were dealt with successfully. And then we've ended up now with all the problems of the right, basically, because of course it's gone too far, and no doubt, until we have a perfect system, the middle way is probably what's best. That is a bit of both. So, proper capitalism and not corporate domination of the rules and regulations to crush competition, but capitalism where it's good for people to start small businesses would be great, with some measure of wealth distribution, particularly from the ultra powerful and ultra rich, would seem to be sensible, and not much taxation on the small businesses. I really think they should be almost exempt, actually, so that they can actually grow a business if they want to. It's silly that in our system the poorest are taxed the most as a percentage of their income, despite graduated taxes. It still seems to work out that way. It does give people a feeling of participation in society, but well, maybe it's a bit too much. However, reorganising all that is a major task. There are known inefficiencies in capitalism as well, and I'm just talking about this because it's what I've been thinking about lately, and how can we improve society, and why does capitalism need to be controlled a bit? What's the argument? I suppose is what I'm saying. People argue that the best products make it to the market and win in the competition of the marketplace, but it's not actually always true. For instance, I'm sure there are many other examples, but I've mentioned this one before, I think, that VHS videotapes outcompeted Betamax, but Betamax were technologically far superior and are still used in the film industry, in fact, or for those who haven't gone completely digital already. But the VHS people managed to get more movies onto their systems than the Betamax people, so the businesses were being run better, but the product is not better. It was worse. And the best products often don't make it because the big companies lobby the government, the EU, to make rules that their smaller competitors cannot afford to maintain or to keep up with. Like you have to change your packaging, you have to have a specific bottle size with so many types of capsules in it of particular format, and on and on and on. And the big companies can adjust their machinery to match. They've got millions and millions to spare. But the little farmyard producer of vitamin tablets or whatever can't do that. And they drop out of the business. And the big companies have crushed the competition, not because their products are any better, but by subverting the legal system. You also get problems of built-in obsolescence. You would think, under competition, that people would be pressured to make their products the best quality that they could, and sometimes it has that effect until you end up with a partial monopoly, or a close enough monopoly. Then suddenly the pressure changes, and the pressure is to force consumers to keep buying the product. It's no good if you produce the perfect razor blade that never gets blunt. because they'll buy it once and they'll not need to buy it anymore. And the same goes for clothing and pretty much every other product you get these days. They're made pretty shoddily. It's very hard and very expensive to get really good quality stuff which is going to last. Now, I remember in the old Soviet Union, which I'm not saying is a good system at all, totalitarianism is bad, but they used to make clothes, like jeans for example, and they'd include a tin with jeans of spare buttons and zips and what have you, so that you could keep those jeans going for decades by just using the spare parts you've been supplied with. And they were super hard wearing. I mean, okay, jeans are hard wearing anyway because denim is tough, but now if a stud comes off, it's not really worth you repairing it, especially as the things are so cheap. We're not living in a depression, at least not officially. And people with a bit of money will think, well, I'm not going to spend a couple of hours figuring out how to repair this, I'll just buy another pair. It's very wasteful. And of course we buy gadgets and phones and things which are being upgraded all the time. Windows is upgraded on the PC all the time, and it's no better from a user's point of view, the upgrades. But you have to upgrade because the old ones stop working, because those systems are no longer being supported by the makers. And it's deliberate. You could improve them without making them obsolete in many cases. So it's wasteful. Of course, competition is better than warfare, right? So capitalism is an improvement on trade wars, as it were. I mean, real wars. Or like the old mafia, for example, would deal with their competition not by competing, but by warfare, right? So pure competition by way of trading better is, of course, an improvement. But the best system is cooperation, which is better than competition. We don't have that, or we don't have much of it anyway. So theoretically there should be a better system out there based on people cooperating with each other. I guess this is what Karl Marx would have considered to be socialism, but obviously the experiments in socialism have been a total disaster because humanity was surely not ready for it, and psychopaths and sociopaths were ready for it, to take it over and use it for their own purposes and enslave populations, and they still do. But Marx was probably right that ultimately a socialist kind of system would be better, and we can actually get there technologically, because nanotechnology, or the just robotization of production, can ultimately reduce production costs to near zero of most products, and at that point you don't really need a capitalist system anymore, because products, you're not dealing with scarce resources anymore. At the moment we are dealing with scarce resources. Our planet is running out. We're not in that state at the moment. In fact, we're probably about to crash badly, and I think it's worth getting in a few extra tins of soup, you know. I don't know what else you need to get in. You can view the preppers if you want to know. It all looks too horrible to me. But ultimately, maybe if we get resources from asteroids and what have you, we can keep going, but we do need to keep the environment going. And capitalism as it's currently configured is not capable of looking after the environment, because it regards those costs as external. They're not made to pay for the damage they do. And we, the consumer, have not as yet been made to pay for the damage that we're doing by buying these damaging products. Well, our 1% leadership are going to have to come up with a solution. But at the moment, they're just heading for the cliff edge. A solution is massive depopulation, of course. But it's not a very good one. Although if you're part of the 1%, you would not be affected by that, of course. So, yeah. If you're part of the 1% and a sociopath, it sounds perfect, I suppose. Another problem with competition, of course, is duplication of effort. When you have multiple companies competing for the same market, that's necessarily inefficient, at least for a time. The classic example, perhaps, is the London Underground system, which originally each of the lines on the system were run by different companies. And for instance, at King's Cross you had about 3 different companies pulling in train lines to those stations. You had King's Cross here, you had St Pancras next door. I think you had a station called Broad Street in between, and these are all literally next door to each other, with train lines from different companies trying to service the same area. Eventually it was nationalised effectively by the state and taken over now. All of it is run by Transport for London. The old Broad Street station has been taken away altogether. It's just gone. The tunnels still exist to interconnect that with King's Cross and St Pancras, and the line which went there, I think it was the Circle line, is now integrated into the rest of the system, and it's more efficient for it to be run as a single company, in fact. It's cheaper for everyone as well, as it happens. And yeah, sometimes competition just leads to a mess. Sometimes it works. But I think as a society we need to be prepared to step in when competition doesn't work and fix it. And not just ideologically say, well, it must be good because it's capitalist. That's not good enough, I think. Another example, I suppose, of inefficiency, which isn't usually cited, I guess, is private medicine, which I think is inefficient. Maybe you disagree. Leave comments, obviously, whether you agree or disagree with what I'm saying. But although the medical care, say in the United States, which is the sort of archetypal example of it, is very good and very, very expensive, it's also very inefficient, because you're supporting 3 million people working in the insurance industry who need not be there under socialised medicine. You also have large numbers of medical bankrupts, and you have about 2 to 3 million people who do not have access to medical insurance at all. And yes, there are a few state hospitals to mop them up. Well, that's not good, because they're known to be not that great in quality. And you actually have to have staff in the good hospitals to turn away the people who are not qualified. I think Mrs. Obama used to do that. So those 3 million people working in insurance could be doing something useful, like being doctors and nurses, maybe. You know? One interesting feature of the way things have become is that, oh yes, and of course the medical bankrupts, being financially paralysed, are not really able to contribute to the system. They still get medical help, I understand it, in America, because it's illegal not to provide medical help for people just because they can't pay, just because their insurance it's too expensive, etc., etc. So they still get medical help, and their medical insurance debts pile up and are completely unpayable by them. And I think that's good, and it's good to screw the system. If you've got medical conditions and the system is stupid, just civil disobedience is the right thing to do. Go and get your medical treatment, right? And stuff the insurance companies, they're all a waste of time anyway, right? They would be, as I say, they'd be unnecessary under a socialised medicine system. Now, I'm not saying there shouldn't be a choice. I think there should be a choice, and if people want to go private, that's their choice, and that's good. But they should pay, I don't really see the point in insurance. I guess if they want to pay insurance premiums, yeah, it shares it out a bit. People are paying $500 a month and more for insurance premiums in America, and they complain that our socialised medicine in the UK is inefficient. Well, it isn't. I don't pay $500 a month for my free medical treatment. I'm paying maybe $100. I haven't worked it out, but it's nowhere near that. And because everybody else is paying as well, it's covered, And 3 million people who could be ticking boxes in insurance companies are free to do something else useful. And that is one feature of modern capitalism, interestingly, is the rise of what David Graeber calls, probably words I can't say on YouTube, but there you go, bull something jobs, right? These are jobs where people feel that they are not actually benefiting humanity at all. If you're a train driver, you're doing something useful, you're getting people to work or getting people to visit their relatives and things of this sort. It's a benefit to humanity. But if you're working in a job centre trying to foist inappropriate jobs on claimants and interviewing them and asking them why haven't they been looking for work and stuff like that, when you know that they probably have been and that there's no jobs available or something like that, then you're not benefiting humanity, you're just taking money from the system for no benefit to anyone except yourself, I suppose. There are lots of jobs like that, and even in big corporations, especially perhaps in big corporations, there are loads and loads of pointless paper pushers. There are lots of managers who feel that having more employees in their department makes them look more powerful, and maybe it does help them gain further promotions and within the business. But then they just find useless paperwork and spreadsheets and stuff for people to study and make reports on, which get stashed away and are never read, to bolster that importance. Or you get managers who don't like, say, outsourcing work, when outsourcing can be more efficient. Sometimes it isn't, sometimes it is. But they don't want the work outsourced because it takes power away from themselves as they see it. They want people under them who they control. Maynard Keynes, back in I think the 1930s, predicted that with the success of industrialization and the modern economy, it should result in us having a 2-day week, or maybe a 3-day week. He said, I think, within a decade or two, and I think we actually may have achieved it, except that so many of the jobs that people have now are actually just time-filling, unnecessary paperwork. Now, those serve a useful purpose for the 1% because they keep people busy and out of politics. But now that people capitalists want to automate jobs. Most of those paper pushing jobs can indeed be automated. But you've got to get rid of the managers first, otherwise you'll never get rid of the people under them. So most of those managers' jobs can also be automated or done away with altogether, actually. We could quickly move to a 4-day, 3-day, a 2-day week. And I think it may be going to happen fairly soon. We need to reduce production, waste productions for sure. And wasting people's time in pointless jobs probably has to go. I don't think my job is pointless. I do IT support, and I'm helping people to work, like the train driver. I'm helping, most of the times some user has broken their computer or their software somehow, and I go along and fix it, right? And that's helping people to achieve their goals. But a lot of the work that a lot of these people are doing is not that useful at the end of the day. And so a lot of those jobs could be cut down massively. There's a lot of bureaucracy that I see with people spending their lives studying spreadsheets or performance metrics and so on, which really you don't need. If people are doing the job, you don't need someone looking over their shoulder seeing if they're doing it well. You need some degree of supervision, but honestly, they'd be better off going to the beach than looking at spreadsheets all day. Maybe look at them once a week. I don't know. It's just ridiculous. And it makes no difference. So when my bosses are spending their time studying spreadsheets, and we have our one-to-one meetings every month, and they go over performance, well, the performance, when it's good, it's good. When it's bad, there's some reason for it. I know it. They know it. What's the point? You do have to manage the workers who are not efficient, and fine, but really, once you get rid of them or find a position where they're suited, you don't need any more, and most of it seems superfluous to me, most of the management side. So there you go. I'm not saying they shouldn't have a job, but maybe there are more useful ones around. But maybe they shouldn't. Maybe everybody should have a universal basic income, which would help with this automation process. I've argued in another video for the universal basic income, because basically I want to be paid to do nothing, right? So for me it sounds like a great idea. However, I'm going to be retiring in a few years anyway, at which point I will get my universal basic income, my pension, right? It turns out, to my surprise, I'm entitled to a state pension, because I didn't think I'd made enough contributions, but it turns out I have. I won't have a private pension, because I never didn't contribute enough. And I saw that the insurance companies were making a mess of the investments. Anyway, and sure enough, I've looked at stats, and yes, they're still losing money on people's pensions when a person can invest privately and make a profit. So, great experts, these. Anyway, universal basic income might assist with this process, because it will allow people to quit their jobs, especially the useless ones. It will allow companies to shed these inefficiencies if the people at the top really understand how inefficient they are. And some companies are so inefficient internally, and they spend money like water as well. It's incredible. Because I tend to support big corporations with my work, so I see such waste. Oops, I just dropped my iPhone in the toilet. Can I have a new one? Sure. £800, there you go. Make them pay for it, I say, if they're making it, but no, they don't. Anyway, there are potentially issues with the universal basic income, trying to get it to work well. One issue might be inflation, for example, because it probably will encourage scroungers. But I've argued elsewhere that, if people are scroungers, then they're scoundrels now probably already. So at least they'll be consumers, right? They can sit there zombified with their mobile phone or Netflix and let them consume digital data. Good riddance. But there are other possible ways that it could be misused, because the point of the universal basic income is that everybody gets it no matter what, right? There should be no favoritism. But it's very likely, it seems to me, that it won't be implemented properly at first, especially. And there'll be something like a social credit system, like China's questionable system, whereby you are more entitled to it if you are more mainstream, basically. So if you're inclined to wrong think, you might get deductions made. Or if you don't vaccinate your children, maybe. Or if you homeschool your children and don't put them through the state brainwashing system. In the case of vaccination, I do believe the science, and I do think it's good for people, good for children. But some people don't. And not every scientific bandwagon turns out to be correct in the end. People should be free to make proper choices. Informed choices. There should be plenty of resources for people to inform themselves, and not just conspiracy theorists talking, but scientists could usefully make some videos and say why they think it's good. There are probably some there, but they're not so good at publicising it, are they? You might be forced to pay for public health care from your UBI, your universal basic income, instead of it being free, because at the moment, say, the National Health Service is paid for out of taxes, but I think the robots should be taxed and the big corporations should be taxed and pay for it. But it might not go that way. They might say, well, we'll give you the universal basic income, but you're going to be taxed on it. And anyway, taxation makes you feel part of society, so it may not be quite the income it looks like at first. It seems a bit stupid, though, to give the money out with one hand and take it away with the other, but nothing stops a government from being stupid, obviously. Probably a universal basic income will result in a net loss of income for people who give up work. But it will result, therefore, in a net increase in profits, particularly for big corporations, which is why capitalism is in favour of it, of course, why it's a capitalist idea. The rich want it. They want to get rid of the employees, because employees are a pain, right? They can sue you. They want rights. They want holidays. They want to be paid for doing nothing. Well, let's give them what they want, right? Pay them for doing nothing. Or maybe they just come in to work once a week and just do what's essential and go away again. What can't be roboted? We should bear in mind that artificial intelligence is artificial imbecility. It's not intelligent. It's a fake intelligence. It only does what it's told still. And even capitalism is a form of artificial intelligence. So is socialism. So are all these economic systems. They are types of artificial intelligence, but just not instantiated through computers. The market is a kind of non-intelligent data processing system that happens to kind of do what we want. The purpose of an economic system is to meet our needs. And when it doesn't, we need to tinker with it to make it do it. And that, in a nutshell, is why arguments that the market should be left entirely to itself are just wrong. Because if they're not meeting our actual needs, then they need to be fixed. That's it. And sometimes they don't. They meet the needs, as I mentioned, of the wealthy, because they have all the money, or most of it. So that's not good enough, is it, for the rest of us? Another thing about the universal basic income is that it probably will serve to pacify people in much the same way that being forced to work all the time does, because being forced to work all the time, okay, you don't have time to get involved in politics and activism. And you certainly would, on a universal basic income, you'd also have time to form a rock band and practice and get good like they did in the 60s in Britain, people who were able to stay on the dole for ages before they started trying to kick people off the dole. But instead, these days, we've got universal brainwashing techniques like, Facebook and Netflix, which I mentioned already, and things of this sort, which, give people their little dopamine hits and keep them quiet and uneducated. And that's a big problem, because maybe people wouldn't spend the time to educate themselves when they can laze about and have an income for no reason. There's no incentive, is there, really? But an uneducated populace cannot support social freedoms because they won't understand them. You get that somewhat with the dumbing down of the population we've got already, and this sort of mania for no platforming people who say the wrong thing or who have supposedly bad beliefs. What the no platformers and people of low IQ in general are not going to understand, some will, but when you're less intelligent and less educated, it's harder to get your head around it. If you no platform people, you in the end will be no platformed yourself. It's not feasible to just no platform the wrong people, or if you like, the right people, but those with wrong think. It's not feasible. It won't happen like that. Already, although the left, for example, have been bleating on about no platforming Alex Jones and people like that, okay. Some of whom are crazy, some of whom are just being taken out of context. Some of whom are clearly wrongly maligned by the media, and some of whom probably do deserve to be put in a loony bin or something. But then the same criteria applies to the people on the left in the end, the extremists. So Antifa, for example, are leftist extremists, or they claim to be, but actually when you look at their behaviour, they're not very left. They're more like the historical National Socialists and people like that. But when you start eating away at one bit of freedom, the rest of it follows, because it's not possible to be truly discriminative, It's not possible to discriminate properly. So basically, you need an educated population to support freedoms. So there's a danger with UBI that some people I guess will educate themselves, but most people will not have the incentive or the gumption to do so in a serious way, like studying, spending years at university, or even school, perhaps. Will those systems be undermined? They might. We'll end up with a bunch of absolute sheep, as if people aren't bad enough at the moment. So, lots of things to worry about in the future, including the climate. There's going to be a general strike for the climate on September the 20th, worldwide. Now, I don't see many people even know about it, actually. I've cheated. I'm going to take the day off work, but I've booked it as holiday. And I might make a video about whatever's going on in London on that day. It depends. I might not. And the weather might be chronic. It's going to be September after all. If I really thought there was going to be a big general strike, then I would just join it. But I don't think there will be a big general strike, because most people don't even know about this event. So I'll take it as annual leave and go and see. Because we haven't reached a kind of tipping point with the population yet, where it's what it is a first try to get adults involved in the school strike for climate system and the Extinction Rebellion type thing. There are adults in that, but they're mostly student types and unemployed types at the moment, and middle class types who've got a bit of spare time and a bit of spare money and can support themselves doing it. To roll that out to the population at large is a tough call, right? Because people need their jobs at the moment and they don't want to antagonise their bosses if they don't feel that everybody else is going to go on strike with them. It's only viable, like with most revolutions, it comes about suddenly when suddenly lots of people get involved. If just a few people are getting involved, well, you can slap them in jail or sack them or whatever, and that's the end of it. You've got to get over some sort of threshold. I don't think they're there yet. But we need to sort out the climate and the sixth mass extinction, of course. And in terms of the mass extinction, we might consider just how unlikely it is that we humans would be alive at all. I've done videos on like the Fermi paradox and how incredibly unlikely it is that there is intelligent life on Earth, and why we probably won't find much elsewhere in the universe. But I didn't even mention, I don't think, the cosmic constants. There's lots of cosmological constants which are super finely adjusted so that if they were changed at all, or hardly at all, life would not be possible. For instance, I found another one today, the Planck Density, at 10 to the minus 43 seconds into the existence of this universe, when it had a Planck density of about 10 to the 93 grams per cubic centimetre of the universe. So this is like the first mini micro nano pico gigasecond of the universe, right? A zillionth of a second into existence. It had a specific density. And that density, we now know, if it varied by 0.122 zeros, 13, if its actual value is 0.000 122 zeros, 136. If that value was 0.122 zeros, 137, galaxies wouldn't have formed, right? Probably that would mean that not so many stars would have formed, and planets probably not, because there wouldn't be the accumulations of material around to build them up. We would not be here. And if it was 0.122 zeros 135 instead, the galaxies might have formed and crushed themselves to death too soon, and so on. So that's, think about that. Write it down, maybe 0.000000. I'm not going to count 122 zeros. Just one digit in the 125th decimal place. If that was different, our universe would not be suitable for our kind of life. And there are quite a few constants which, if they vary just a tiny bit like that, our universe would not be suitable for life. The fact that it is very peculiar, and physicists think, well, it must mean there's a gadzillion parallel universes with random properties, and this is just one of them that happens to get it right. Well, yeah, if you want to say there has to be a physical explanation, then that might be it. It remains unproven, it's just a possible answer. It may be an artificial universe, of course, a simulation, but then the universe in which it is being simulated would have similar probabilities, presumably, of existing. So you've just removed the problem one step. I haven't done many gameplay videos lately, partly because I haven't been feeling like it so much, but I will continue to do them. I just did a Surviving Mars series, I think, last month. But I'm a bit bothered by the stats, really, because gameplay videos do not seem to attract anything like the number of views that my vlogs do and that my sightseeing videos do. On the other hand, I have a feeling they attract more subscribers. So it's difficult, but I can't tell from the new YouTube studio system. Haven't figured out how to work out which videos are producing the most subscribers yet. And I've forgotten how to do it under the old system because I don't check my stats all that often. But what seems to be the most popular videos are the sightseeing videos and the vlogging and science type videos. Also how-to and IT videos, interestingly, but I'm not that interested in doing them. Which is a shame because they probably would do quite well. But I have to follow my star, as it were, and do what I do, you know. So if you know how to tease out which videos produce the most subscribers in YouTube stats, let me know. I've tried searching on Google, but it doesn't understand the question. I get loads of videos about how to increase your subscriber level. That's not what I'm asking. Right. I'm asking how can I analyse the stats to see which of my videos have done the trick. I can see which ones get the most watch time, I can see which ones get the most views, but where's the ones that get the most subscribers? Having said that, my beginner's guide to Anno 1404 and Civilization 4 still are way up in the stats. They get the most views, or near the most views, most of the time. And most of the watch time too, most of the time. But I first brought those out years ago. It's just that somehow the YouTube algorithm thinks they're great. They're no different to any of my other gameplay videos, so it's all a bit strange. Pardon me. They have the same tags and I don't know what. It's just a fluke. So I'm not going to touch them because they work. But most of the other gameplay videos, the next most watched gameplay video on my list is about number 50 out of my videos. So, not so great. Although I've got like over 1,000 videos up. What else can I talk about? Brexit. Britain and the EU. Now, I've mentioned in other videos that I'm kind of in favour of Brexit overall. But it doesn't mean that I hate Europe and even the EU. I think that countries working together and cooperating with each other is a good thing. But I think it's wrong to impose it from the top against the wishes of the populations. You need to bring the people with you if you want to do something like that. Otherwise it will fail, and it might even fail catastrophically. And it's failing in a sense that there's a large democratic deficit in the way they're doing it. That's a failure to trust people. And it shows that the 1%, which includes these top politicians, in my view, at least they may not be as rich as the top 1%, but they're 1% in terms of publicly available or visible influence, don't respect the populations, and they want to do what they want to do regardless, because they think it's best. And yes, on the face of it, the nations cooperating with each other and all that is good. But I think it is dangerous to impose a political agenda on a population that does not really go along with it. People in Europe tolerate it, and we do enjoy visiting our European friends and all the rest of it. But it's not being done in an organic way, it's being done in a legalistic way. then making up endless rules and regulations which are damaging small business, damaging certain industries, good for some corporations, bad for liberties, although they are also making regulations to enforce some liberties, so that's good. But I don't think humans are actually intelligent enough to do it properly. It needs to be developed organically and not imposed intellectually, because it will not be possible even for the most intelligent and influential humans to come up with a system which will actually work well and safely. There are not enough checks and balances for a start. I mean, the court system, the Court of Human Rights is kind of biased in favour of the EU, always. It's like a nice idea, but it's just not being done safely. Probably somebody could flesh out those arguments a bit more than me. It's more of a feeling than an intellectual argument with me. But I think that there is a real danger to imposing systems without just encouraging their development and seeing where they go. That would be better, because they would develop, and people would develop means of moving them in an appropriate direction, a way that works for themselves and others. So it should be done more by, not by political stealth, but by step by step, slow, getting countries to work together. Yes, lift barriers, but not necessarily imposing new stuff. Let it be worked out as it goes. It doesn't seem to me that that's what's happening. It seems to me that an old plan from the 1950s is still being implemented much as it was. Well, we'll find out probably over the next few years, maybe. Well, okay, comments? I don't know what I'm going to do in my next video, so I'll see you anyway then. Bye for now.